Hello. In this video, I'm going to share some ideas about asparagus since it is in season locally now in Pennsylvania. In this video, I will give you some suggestions about how to store and prep asparagus and some suggestions about different things you might do if you're cooking it and just want some different ideas. The local asparagus season in central PA lasts from about late April to mid-June, depending on how the season goes. Every year, the weather can impact that, of course, but I've been able to get local asparagus for the past couple of weeks now. And the reasons that you want to buy local, if you can, is that number one, it supports the local farmers. It's also better produce when it's picked at its prime as it is when it's local. It's going to be more flavorful and it's going to last longer. You'll find that it probably stores longer raw in the refrigerator than if you get it in the grocery store. And it may also contain more nutrients. I can't absolutely promise that, but the general tendency is that when produce is picked too early, it hasn't had a chance for all of the nutrients to develop completely. So when it has been picked at its prime, it is going to be more nutritious. And there is just a much better chance that local produce has been picked at its prime. This also reduces your carbon footprint because you're not adding to the fossil fuels that are burnt when things are distributed from across the country or even sometimes from across continents and the globe. So if you have some raw asparagus and you're not ready to use it as soon as you get it, you can keep it fresh longer by placing it in a jar with 1 to 2 inches of water. You want to make sure that the cut ends are immersed fully in the water, so 1 to 2 inches, and then just loosely cover it with a plastic bag. And it can keep in the fridge this way for up to 7 to 10 days. You'll want to keep an eye on it because if it was picked maybe just a little bit too late, or if there was something that was maybe not necessarily wrong with the asparagus, but you never know if there were some bugs or some mold in the vicinity, it might start to go off sooner. So do keep an eye on it, but it can keep for 7 to 10 days in the fridge if it is picked at its prime and it has no mold or any bacteria or anything that might be influencing it. Also, what's around it in the crisper drawer can affect it too. So if you have other produce that's going off, you want to be careful about that. So to prep your asparagus, you want to break off the tips and they should snap off easily. You can do this before or after you wash it. If you are planning to do something specific with the asparagus tips, you might want to do this after you wash it, but I am just going to go ahead and wash it now and snap these off now because I have locally grown organic asparagus, so I'm not really concerned if I wanted to compost, for example, that I'm putting anything in my compost that might contain chemicals that are harsh and maybe not wanted. But if you have conventional asparagus that might have pesticides, you might decide to go ahead. If you're going to do something with those tips other than just chuck them in the garbage, you might want to go ahead and wash first, or else just wash the tips as well along with the rest of the asparagus. It doesn't matter if you snap first or wash first. But when you snap it, usually around, sometimes when you get it, they might have already done this for you, especially if you are getting it from a local farmer. They might just go ahead and make it really easy for you, but others just pull it and cut the ends off and bunch it up for you to take care of the rest. So when it's very long, you can just find about an inch or so and just pull and it'll snap really easily like that. You don't need to force it very much. Just kind of put your hand down toward the end and just break it like that. It breaks very easily. If they're not breaking for you like that, then chances are the farmer has already snapped the tips off for you. Or you can even ask them when you purchase because most farmers are happy to tell you about their produce. So the next thing you want to do is immerse your asparagus in cold water. Use cold water, not warm water. You might want to think that warm water will help to remove some of the dirt and debris and maybe even some of the chemicals, and that might be true. But if you're letting the asparagus soak for any period of time, you want it to soak in cold water because some color is actually released in warmer temperatures, which means you can end up losing some of the green of the asparagus into the water if you're using a warm water and you're soaking it for an extended period of time. So cold water is the best option just to make sure that you're not losing any of the green. And you want to mix that with some vinegar, either white vinegar or apple cider vinegar. If you're using organic produce, or if you've talked to the farmer and they're not certified organic, but they're not using pesticides, you can probably do what I do and just add like a tablespoon of vinegar in with your water and mix it a little bit, and then just let the asparagus soak for a few minutes, and then rinse it for about 20 to 30 seconds under cold water and let it drain. If you're using asparagus that you either aren't sure if it's been treated with pesticides or you know for sure it has been, then I recommend soaking for about 20 minutes in a solution of half vinegar, half water, because the vinegar is not going to remove all pesticides, as I have said in other videos, but it will help to remove as many as possible. So a 50-50 solution is good for that for conventional produce. I will share several suggestions for actually cooking asparagus next, but for right now, thinking about also storing asparagus longer term, maybe you want to get some and freeze it while it's available in season fresh locally. What you don't want to do is freeze raw asparagus. A lot of these green vegetables can tend to turn bitter if they're frozen, especially for extended periods of time and they were raw when you froze them. Broccoli, for example, Brussels sprouts, even some of the leafy vegetables like kale. Kale is okay, but it doesn't last all that long, maybe a month in the freezer. But if you want them to last longer and you don't want them to turn bitter, you want to blanch them first. Or you can fully cook them. What happens though is they can lose some of their crispness if you roast them and then freeze them. If you want to try to retain as much crispness as possible, then blanch it first. So just do all of the steps that I've already showed you, removing the tips and washing and rinsing. And then you just want to boil the asparagus, or you can steam it. You'll boil for a little less time, and it really depends on how thick the asparagus stems are, how long you want to blanch them. This batch of asparagus that I have that came from one farm, it has, as you can see, two different thicknesses. So I would probably want to, when I'm boiling or steaming, I usually steam. It's actually easier to pull things out if I need to. So I would pull the thinner asparagus out first after maybe 3 minutes or so, and I would let the thicker ones go for maybe 5 to 6 minutes. Sometimes the asparagus is even thinner than this, so you definitely want to cook any of that at the shortest period of time if you want to try to retain as much crispness as possible, but also cook it enough that it's not going to turn bitter if you freeze it. So once you've cooked it, you want to submerge it in a cold water bath. This will stop the cooking process. And you want to do that for the same amount of time that you allowed the asparagus to steam or to boil. Now, if you've cooked several different lengths of time because you have different thicknesses of asparagus like I do, it's fine to let the ones that have cooked for a lesser period of time in for a little bit longer. You don't have to time it that perfectly and pull those out first or anything. You can go ahead and put those in the bath and then add the thick ones into the bath and just let them all go until the thick ones are ready to come out. But they do need to be in for at least as long as they cooked in order to get the centers back down to a room temperature. Once that's done, you can just drain it and then place it in an airtight container, and it should keep for a few months, up to 6 months or even longer. There's always a risk of freezer burn. It really depends on how well sealed your containers are, how long it's going to keep in the freezer. And then you can pull it out and you can use it in a variety of things, and it will cook a little faster probably since it's been partially cooked already. So those are the things I suggest for storing and preparing your asparagus so that you can eat it. And now I'm just going to share a couple of different ideas for things you might do. if you've either tried recipes and are just looking for some different ideas, or if you've never had asparagus before, want to try it and are looking for some ideas of how to get started. My favorite way to eat asparagus is roasted. Roasting brings out the flavor of vegetables, potatoes, and even certain fruits. So I love to roast it. I usually roast mine at 375 because I don't necessarily want it to char. But if you like to get it charred a bit, you could turn up the oven a bit, and then you might need to cook it just a little less time. I usually cook mine for 12 to 18 minutes, depending on how thick it is. And this is another case of, since I have a batch that is mixed in thickness, I would probably I would test the thin ones after about 12 minutes. And if they're done, I would probably pull those out and let them cool a bit. If I'm trying to serve a whole group of people and I need the whole batch to be warm, I could always throw them back in for a few minutes at the end to keep them warm, but or just for a minute or two to warm them back up if they're thin, because they will warm up quickly. But I don't want them to cook for like an extra 5 minutes or so if the thick ones need more time. And then you can treat your pan with oil if you'd like. It's not absolutely necessary that you do that. Sometimes I will treat it with olive oil and sometimes I don't worry about it. I just roast the asparagus plain because I don't know what I'm going to do with it, if I'm going to freeze it for later, or I'm just going to eat it in different ways through the week. I might not want anything specific on it at this point. And you can also just brush it with olive oil if you'd prefer. That's another way to go. Or again, you can just let it go plain. And then at the end, if you're looking for more than just the asparagus and want some flavor to add to it, I like to drizzle it with different things. You can take it out of your oven and drizzle it with a little soy sauce or some garlic chili oil, maybe some hot sauce, any other favorite sauce, and just put it back in the oven for several minutes. You can even turn the oven off at this point. It's really just the heat in general. If you're trying to serve different people who like different things, it would be perfectly fine to serve these sauces as condiments. However, if you're making for yourself or everybody in your family or everybody you're feeding likes the same thing, then putting it back in the oven helps to kind of release the flavors of the sauces that you're using. So it can be helpful flavor-wise, but it's not absolutely necessary. Another thing you can do that you might not have seen unless you were lucky enough to get a recipe or find this in a restaurant at some point is to stir fry your asparagus. And if you do this, once you remove the tips and wash it, you'll also want to cut it into probably 2 to 3 inch pieces. So the size of matchstick type vegetables that we use that we eat when we're having stir fries, and we might eat with chopsticks. That kind of general size is what you should think about, what you'd see in a stir fry that could easily be picked up with chopsticks, even if you're not necessarily using chopsticks. And then if you want to just stir fry some asparagus by itself, then you can just heat about a tablespoon of oil for every bunch of asparagus you're cooking, and heat it in either a wok or a deep skillet on medium, and then just go ahead and, if you're cooking it plain, you can go ahead and just throw the asparagus in and let it cook. It's nice to add some other flavor though if you want to stir fry it, and use maybe some onions, some garlic, a little ginger. You can add chilies if you like some heat, and cook any of those. If you're going to cook them, the onion will take a few minutes to get tender, and then throw in the garlic and any chilies, maybe some ginger, and let them go for another minute. And then if you're going to add any meat or tofu, especially if you're using a recipe, you'll want to cook that after you add the onion and the ginger and garlic and chilies, and cook it for the recommended time. After all of that, you can add in the asparagus. If you're not doing that, you can skip that and just go ahead and put the asparagus in. You should think of it kind of like broccoli. It could even be a substitute for broccoli if you have a broccoli stir fry recipe you like and want to try it with asparagus instead. It's going to take approximately the same amount of time, give or take, depending on how thick the pieces of broccoli are that you would normally cook, and given how thick your asparagus is. If you blanch the asparagus first, it also might take a little less time, but think in terms of maybe like upwards of 10 minutes of cooking and turning it at least once. And then after you've cooked the asparagus, you can add any other vegetables. Usually other vegetables take less time, things like mushrooms and peppers, and leafy greens like spinach. You can add those and cook those until they're done. Follow a recipe that calls for a bunch of things. And then you can put in a little soy sauce if you'd like, or some tamari or liquid aminos, and just toss it to coat, and you've got a nice stir-fried asparagus, either plain without anything extra like tofu or other veggies, or you can go ahead and put it in a stir fry that you like. So that's another option of something to think about, a different way to try asparagus, especially when it's fresh in season. That's the best time to do a stir fry. So it would be a really great time to try that now. Those are all of the suggestions that I have. I hope that you're able to get some fresh asparagus. It's available now from the farmers at the farmers markets, and maybe even in some of the grocery stores. You might even find some along the road if you drive by their farms. So enjoy. I hope that the recipes and suggestions here have been helpful.